All right,
All
this is
right.
episode. Oh, you got it. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Welcome to episode 36. New format, 2 p.m. on a Wednesday. And today, Hack and I have picked one quote each from Eckhart Tolle's New Earth. And we're going to be responding, reacting, and discussing some of the concepts in those quotes. Sound like a plan?
Yeah, I'm good with it. I guess I'll go first. The top quote's mine, and then Steven can go second. I'll read the quote out, and then we just talk about it. I guess I can give my initial reaction, and Steven, we can just go back and forth. So the quote I found was, "Words, no matter whether they are vocalized and made into sounds or remain unspoken as thoughts, can cast an almost hypnotic spell upon you. You easily lose yourself in them, become hypnotized into implicitly believing that when you have attached a word to something, you know what it is. The fact is, you don't know what it is. You have only covered up the mystery with the label." Um, I think we've spoken about this topic on this podcast before. It's kind of like the idea of like what exactly is a word, what exactly is a thought. Like a word is just like this sound that you make. It's like decibel symbols that represent decibels that you make, and those decibels are supposed to represent an object, a person, a thing in your environment. Once you have that symbol, and once you have like the order of symbols that represent the word, then you can think the word in your head as if you are thinking the object that you've labeled the word with. And that makes you think you, I guess, know it, but the object itself is the word at best is a sign pointing to the object in reality. But in order to hold that reality in your head, you have to contain it in a word. And I think that's what that quote kind of means to me. It kind of this is so this is a live demonstration of me trying to work through my own thoughts about this, and it's kind of meta. Um, but yeah, just like the idea that words aren't real, thoughts aren't real. It's the thing that's real. It sounds like really simple, but I think it's a big idea for me. I don't know, Steven, where are you at on this? Help me out.
Yeah. No, I mean you're spot on, and we've spent a lot of time, I think, in prior pods, kind of deconstructing language, grammar, all that kind of stuff, subject, object, and what have you. But what struck me a little bit more about this quote is not so much the first half, right? Which kind of talks about how we get lost in the world of thought and words, but the latter half, right? Like covering the mystery with a label, right? Like just because we think we've defined it, we've labeled it, we've read it up in a dictionary, or we have understood the ways that people around us in society, conceptualize something, that we think we know it, we know what it is, but in reality, almost everything around you, like, is completely makes no sense that it exists, right? That consciousness is even a thing. Like, what are we even doing, in terms of like this viewport of being alive and looking through these two eyes, right? Like, I think that super gets lost. Like sometimes just for fun, like I grab something in a moment of mindfulness just to like touch it, like, and just be like, okay, this is like, what is this actually that that I'm holding and touching, right? Like trying to see it again, I guess, without the label. Um, so I think that's like invites like curiosity back into life, which I think is one of the most important things for like happiness, and well being, is to be constantly curious. And but anyway, yeah, that was kind of like the impact that this quote had on me, in
Yeah,
short.
and I think when you put a label on something, and you have to use words and labels in order to interact with the world and be able to conceptualize things. But when you put a label on something, and when you label it, it's almost as if you automate it away in in a sense. Like let's say the idea of a tree. So in my head, I'm like trees, four-letter word, one syllable, tree. But if I go outside and I look at all the trees like on my street, there are like so many different species of trees. You know, some of them have like pine leaves, some of them have like some of them are oak trees, some of them have like I guess like acorns and walnuts on like some of them like are like huge and they've been around forever. Some of them are just like little saplings. But the idea of tree is like, you know, when I walk past the tree on the sidewalk because of the automated away, I don't even think twice. I'm just like tree, you know, it's just a fucking tree. Just walk past it. Um, I feel like I've had this experience maybe on a microdose. And I don't know if you've had this experience too, but like driving to work on a microdose and seeing and driving past the trees in my neighborhood, but like almost like seeing them for the first time, like holy shit, that tree has like little blackberries on them, or that tree has, you know, like these huge leaves on them, and this other tree, like half of it broke off because of the windstorm last week. But like having never been able to notice that before, just because like it's like a tree to like imagine a tree to like a 4 year old. It's probably like holy shit, look at that tree. But a tree to me is just like, oh, just another tree because the idea of tree has already been labeled, automated away. I know what a fucking tree is. You know what I mean? But do I really know what a tree is? That tree or that tree or that other tree? But yeah, that's just why I
Yeah,
think the idea of words is kind of interesting. It sounds stupid and it sounds simple, but that's why I think the idea of automated labels like words and symbols and stuff like that is super interesting because it can add more depth to life experience. When you don't when you see something and the first thing you think about isn't the word, but it's like, oh shit, the thing.
I love that. Yeah. Oh my god. Okay, so it's funny how we were kind of wondering if we would have enough to talk about, and I already have so many things that I'm gonna try to pare it down. But I think the other interesting thing about what you brought up too is that if you can transcend labels, right, which by definition separate things, right? They segment things. Like that's a tree. Like even though you could say like, oh look, a tree is in the dirt, right? But by saying that's a tree, you've separated it from the dirt, you know. Um, but you know, if you actually start to examine, like, if you forget about those segments for a little bit, you realize that everything is in one continuous flow, right? That's a big piece of all the spiritual work here, is that like there's actually all separation is actually fallacious, right? Like the tree has roots, it's has microorganisms that, you know, in mycelium, they're living on the root structures that are constantly exchanging, like, I'm going to use the word energy here, but you know, I could also use like molecules and whatever, right? And then like there's also like water getting sucked up, and then there's sun coming in through the tree. And so this tree is actually just this like continuously flowing conduit of energy and things, right? And it's funny because at a certain point you might walk towards a tree and you're like, oh, that's a dead tree, right? Because now it's like materialized enough things in your visual sphere for you to say now label it as dead, right? But really it's just been in this continuous flow state, and it's because we perceive time in a certain way that we like see this tree at one moment and say, oh, it's dead. But so then time starts to melt away too, right? If you start to see things as fully continuous, like people don't die or born or whatever, it's just like everything is one continuous flow. um and you know, I'll think I'll bring up like the Alan Watts quote too, where this, I think the destination of all of this kind of inquiry is that it's all connected. And um you know, he says this, the thing, the energy, whatever it is that is like beating your heart right now is the same thing that it's shining the sun, right? Because all of these things are all happening simultaneously, and it's our human time frame of reference consciousness that starts to say that, oh, it actually happens in like scene 1, scene 2, scene 3. Scene 3 causes scene 4 because of this thing in scene 3, and then we get wrapped in this world of cause, effect, segmentation, which arguably, like you said, is what starts to drain the richness of life away, right? It gets us too embedded in like the why, and the how come, right? Which causes suffering. So I don't know what that's. I just threw a bunch of things at the wall, right? Some of them just like slid off. I don't know what stuck, but
I'm still not as familiar with the idea that everything happens at once, because obviously as a human you think in terms of synchronistically because of time. Like this happened, so then this happened, so then this happened. Um, can you speak on that? I don't know if you're able to, but even if you're not able to, it'd be dope if you try.
yeah, I can't. I will admit that I can't, but I will say that I was reading like a pop sci article on it recently, because I think the interesting thing about this is where like the studies in quantum physics kind of intersects with spirituality. Uh, you know, the first one I can say with authority that people figured out in science was that like atoms are mostly empty space, right? Like 99% empty space, and the world is made up of atoms. And it's so weird that we continuously going through the world saying like, oh, these things are touching, right? Because of electromagnetism and stuff. So, one, there's that concept. But I think the analogy that I read, the metaphor that I read in that article was that uh, quantum theory and the data that we've gathered thus far tells us that, and Einstein kind of figured this out with special relativity as well, right? That like time is relative, like depending on your speed, right? Like, and we can bend light, like that was crazy. But the metaphor was that it's as if all of that we know is like a DVD disc, right? And our life experience is like playing. We're like a character in that disc, living out the movie. Um, but just like a disc, the way a disc is read, right? I can't. Yeah, I mean, there's a track. There's a track on it, and it revolves, and it just kind of rolls through and reads it, right? At least that's how a vinyl works. I actually have to say I don't know, have no idea how a DVD or CD works, but my I guess my takeaway there is that there's these lines that represent um, like a data stream that is read, right, in sequence. But if you were to just zoom back out and look across the whole disc, you could jump to Act 3 in the movie where the hero gets taken out by the villain and he has to come back, right? And immediately you could jump to the part where the movie first begins, like without having to actually traverse through the movie itself, because the physical structure of the universe is such that it's all there already. So I don't know. Way out. This is like kind of like woo woo out there, but
No, I appreciate that.
yeah,
I think that's a good it's a good metaphor. Or metaphor? Yeah, good metaphor.
yeah. I'm gonna lean on the authority of the guy who said it, right? The physicist who's like, I guess, well regarded, but I'll take his metaphor. He offered it up for a reason, so that we could use it.
Yeah, I think that's a good metaphor because I didn't think about it like that or understand it in that regard. Um, Everything's already happened, but you can only experience like one moment at a time. So from our singular perspective, it's almost as if things haven't happened yet, but it's just because we haven't gotten there yet, in a way.
Yeah. Did you ever see Carl Sagan's 2D people explanation when he explains the world of the 2D people?
So is it like I saw something that explained the difference between like 3D and 4D, but I wouldn't be able to explain it well.
It's a similar category, um, but I mean, this is a good reminder maybe for us to both watch that and then react to it for our next one. But yeah, I mean, Carl Sagan, amazing educator, so he just explains this world of like 2D people really well. That it's the same category of talking, explaining dimensionality, because we're 3D beings, right? And 4D is like we don't live in the fourth dimension, which is time, right? We live in the third dimension, and we only have intimations of the fourth dimension, but we're not native there, right? And so he talks about the difference of like, yeah, what it's like to live in one dimension and just have a sense of the dimension above you, but not actually be from there, um, which is an interesting thought experiment for ourselves, right? To think about what is a native being that like exists above within for the fourth dimension. Um,
Yeah, that'd
they
be
would time
interesting. Yeah.
travel essentially, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that does sound pretty interesting.
yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if you want to go into your quote. I have another idea that I wanted to branch off of, or that's like forming in my head based on our previous discussion just now. Um,
Well, you know what the second quote is, so how about you make the call? But I don't know what you're thinking.
okay, this goes back to when I was talking about trees and automating trees away. Do you get what I'm trying to say when I say you automated away? It's like Leo doesn't, my 4-year-old nephew, Leo doesn't automate a tree away. He'll probably like, if he sees a pine tree, it'll probably be the first time he's seen a pine tree. And he'll be like, "Oh my God, look at these pine cones and stuff." And then like he'll like touch the trees and he'll like, try to like climb on it probably because he's never seen it before. So like even though I'm like, "Yo, that's a tree," he'll probably be like, "It doesn't matter what you call it, I'm gonna climb on this thing." Um, but then over time, I don't know when he's gonna lose that, but at some point he's gonna stop climbing on trees. He's gonna be, "Oh yeah, tree. Oh yeah, another tree, another tree, another tree, another tree." I'm wondering what else we automate away. Like what's something that's like, I don't know, super ordinary now. I mean, it's probably everything, right? I mean, there's probably so much shit that we automate away every day.
We automate away people. That's the funniest one, right? Like,
Yeah, automating away people is fucked up.
but that's what we do. Like we
No, I mean
absolutely do. Yeah,
we have to,
yeah. We
but
automate
that
away parts of ourselves. This is a great lead into the next quote, by the way. But yeah, like we do automate people. Um,
do we have to?
yeah, absolutely.
Do we have to?
Yeah, absolutely. For
I wonder if we have to. You said absolutely. You sound very certain.
when okay, so you're playing football, right? You're a quarterback. You've automated everyone away into a position and into like whether or not you can trust
Y-
this person to hit that timing window, right?
Yeah, they're like little fucking dots in my head, dude. Like
Exactly.
X's and
Yeah,
O's.
because the goal is to win the game, and you had to automate
Okay, but
everything away.
when I say automate away, I don't necessarily mean like in that regard. When I say automate away like a person, like I mean like, hey, this is um this is Leo. Leo is this. And I haven't seen Leo, let's say in a year. And in my head it's still Leo is this. But we all know how much a person can grow in a year. I mean, you're probably different than you were 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But imagine if my idea of Steven, and let's say I haven't, I mean, obviously I don't see you every day, but all those changes that you've gone through, and in my head it's still the same Steven. And then so am I doing you a service or a disservice by automating away? And also, when I say automating away, perhaps there might be a nuance. Because you do like I do have to label you as Steven to be able to refer to you, be like, yo, this is my friend Steven. Otherwise, that would just be fucking weird. But awareness of labels and unawareness of labels are different. Like you can use a label without, I could still call that thing a tree, but still be like, oh my God, this thing uh is amazing. Or it can you know what I'm trying to say, right? Like when I say automate away, like there's automate away as in like I don't even think twice of it, or I'm using the label, but I have awareness around the fact that, yo, this is like a label, but that thing is it's like this, this huge organism with like thousands of leaves that sheds every fall, and and it's the size of a house. And
Yeah. So my short answer to the question, I think we've bumped into this question before in the podcast. Like, it depends on what your vantage point is, right? Like, I think that if I were, for example, to there's this paradox between these two places that I think you and I on this podcast in this spiritual inquiry run into, which is like, if you and I conscripted to become monks, right, and went around being that force of energy that brought people back into seeing everything as a full-on tree and inviting more presence and awareness and stuff like that, then that's what we would be, right? Like, I wouldn't automate anything into you. Like, if I was that, I would just be an open space, and if you tried to poke at me, hopefully in my practice, and hopefully I got enough sleep that day, that like you poke into me and there's no ego, right? Like, I've been able to like dissolve more. But if you talk about me, Steven, who knows that, but then has to go into a job and lead like 10 people toward a goal, like, if anything, what I would do is, try to schedule intermediate moments of presence and mindfulness, but otherwise I would be automating maybe positive beliefs onto people, right? Like, I would almost like try to project an even more ideal version for them to like grow into. Like, if you're going to play in the world of society and form, you're necessarily going to project people into things. Like, maybe you do it in a beneficent way, right? But so when you say, do we have to? No, but like, it would be, but the world is 8 billion people strong right now, and it's like we don't have to all the time. Like, we have to sometimes, but I think for the world to keep going.
is there a way to do it like better, like with presence, with awareness? Like, you think the Dalai Lama automates people away, or you think he's just kind of like always like just like present, even though he still like calls people by their names and shit?
Oh, I mean, I think for someone like the Dalai Lama, he doesn't automate people away. Like, I mean, his specific role is like the paragon, like, if anything, he's like the energy source for other people to like also not, like, his disciples and his Sangha community, right, to not automate people away. And that is to say, to not project onto them, like, for example, if this is a great, we should go into the next quote because it's actually exactly this topic, right?
Sure.
Like, if you wear a suit, I'm gonna treat you like somebody who's wearing a suit, right? It's a very obvious physical material like thing there, but like, there's also like, if you stand up tall, right, I'm gonna like have this image of you as someone who's like confident or what have you, right?
Consciously or unconsciously? Both? Probably both, right?
Yeah, both. I mean, unconscious to start until you start to practice more awareness, right? And I think that you have to necessarily be automatic, but I think you have to have signals that tell you that, like, hey, this is a moment where I need to drop down a level away from automaticity and more towards presence so that I can handle this better, right? Like, certain situations require different things of you. And if you're like, I mean, let's say that you're helping someone through something very traumatic, right? You're going to go down and be fully open, in a fully open state, in a way that kind of helps draw their energy out, right? So, because they're closed, I think people get closed. And that's the far end of automaticity. It's like, they've closed themselves based on their own perceptions and what other people have told them too. So, but how about I read this next quote here? Let's see. All right. You have a mental image not only of who the other person is, but also of who you are, especially in relation to the person you are interacting with. So you are not relating with that person at all. but who you think you are is relating to who you think the other person is, and vice versa. The conceptual image in your mind has made the conceptual image your mind has made of yourself is relating to its own creation, which is the conceptual image it has made of the other person. The other person's mind has probably done the same. So every egoic interaction between two people is in reality the interaction between four conceptual mind-made identities that are ultimately fictions. It is therefore not surprising there's so much conflict in relationships. There is no true relationship.
Does this imply that you can automate yourself away?
Yes.
Because that's fucked up, yo.
And you do, and we do, right? And
We probably do. The story we tell ourselves.
yeah, yeah, we absolutely do. And the story we tell ourselves is a result of other people, you know.
I think that you know that Alan Watts quote. Uh, I think it was something along the lines of, "You are under no obligation to be who you were 5 minutes ago." Um, it seems like such a surface level quote because it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously, but it makes sense why that's profound because it speaks to the illusion of the self, and it speaks to the automation of the self, like away. Like, I mean, I probably act a certain way, probably because it's within the bounds of my idea of hack as well. Um, yeah, so I was just thinking about that quote when you read that one.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great one because you could say, I think you could say that like the reason why human society has been so successful is because somehow we've been able to maintain an like unfathomable number of social relationships, right? And operate in these like big, like super rich social realities. Um, and the fundamental of that is trust, right? And it's a very precarious thing. Like the fundamental thing that makes this all keep going for some reason is the fact that we all, at some implicit level, trust each other to operate by a set of norms, right? And one of the best things that you can do for another person is actually be predictable, right? Like being predictable is pro-social behavior for another person, especially when if you just met this person, right? You might actually offer things that are more indicative of your predictability, right? To get that trust earlier on. But the problem too, though, is that it becomes a trap, right? It becomes a trap for yourself, thinking that you must constantly operate in these ways that society has said are things that you get rewarded for, right? If you dress the same, if you look the same, if you kind of act the same, you are safe. You are in our group. You're in our tribe. And I think it was Jordan Peterson that brought up like the scariest individual in a society is actually one who is complete. It's not actually just someone who's like malicious, right? Like a person who has motive and is like out for themselves and like murders people or whatever, right? It's actually the person who's like beyond comprehension and like unpredictable, right? Like that, sadly, that homeless person who is just like yelling random stuff because they don't know that you don't yell random stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like yelling randomly in a place that's supposed to be quiet is one of like that's another one big social faux pas, right? Like it's like, oh my gosh, like people don't know that you're supposed to like not just be loud all of a sudden. So yeah, I think these little implied rules are interesting in that they're necessary, but they have developed into a malignant neuroses for us. And people feel trapped to be that person they were 5 seconds ago, or even that person that were in elementary school that the teacher was like, good job, here's a star,
when I had my first Aya trip in 2018, I think it was like day 3 of the event, and I had already days 1 and 2. I already saw way like mind blown day 1, mind blowing day 2. I was like, what the hell else can I see on day 3? Um, so day 3 comes, and then I'm going into like like I'm like in the Aya trip, and I think for the first time I considered what it'd be like if hack didn't exist, and I don't know if I meant like physically or just the idea of hack. But I saw all that shit dissolve away. The idea of hack dissolved away, and I just saw first I saw the people in my life that supported the idea of hack, like my brothers and family, friends, all that stuff that kind of like buy into the idea. I would see things like, I would come like 5 minutes late for a meeting, but then my brothers would cover for me. Obviously it's probably unprofessional for me to always show up late to shit late on time, but then they just cover for me, and then so the idea of hack stays like strong and stuff like that. And I saw like people doing that stuff for me, and it was really cool. But then I was thinking like, what would happen if that idea of hack just like went away? And then I saw that idea go away, like just like dissolve away. And obviously, and I'm not sure if it meant physically or like just the idea of it. But then it made people sad and stuff like that. But then I was like, is the idea of hack even necessary? And then I saw like the world, like society, but then everybody's idea of themselves just fucking dissolved away. Everything's gone. Like you wake up tomorrow, you fucking forget who you are. You don't know how old you are. You don't know your name. You don't know your occupation. You don't know anything. And then I saw all this shit, and I was like, man, this is fucking crazy. Um, and then in that moment, I realized I was like, wait, we do need these constructs. Uh, obviously, because like imagine if tomorrow everyone woke up and forgot everything, who they are, how old they are, their expectations, like shit that, like they have to go to work the next day, like all that stuff. Then we wake up, it would just be completely like chaos. And then so it was weird. It was almost like this reset where the thing dissolved away, and I saw what would happen if it dissolved like for everybody. But then it like replugged itself back, and it was like, oh yeah, the reason we have constructs, very important. It allows society to function. It allows you to, like you said, be predictable within your friend group or the people that you interact with, and it allows I don't know, it's just society to exist as a whole. So um,
Can I
I don't
share
know.
a funny anecdote?
Sure.
Uh, so this is like kind of related, but it just made me think of it. So I just got back from a 2 week trip out west, right? And I had visited my buddy Jimmy and his wife Mamiko. Stayed with them in an apartment down in San Diego. And on the first night, like, we went hard. Like Jimmy and I just had a great time, and we had a couple of beers. We didn't realize that they were like 9% beers. Um, and so we got pretty trashed, and I actually threw up in the Uber on the way back. It's
That's
really
funny.
funny. Yeah, and I've never done it before in my life. The first time I've ever done it. And I'm also very self-conscious about not burdening others, not causing trouble, like not inconveniencing others. It's a big thing in my ego, right? And I remember just being like, "Oh my fucking," the Uber driver was just like, "Bro, like seriously?" And then like luckily he had some wet wipes, and then we clean it up. And Mamiko, who it's my friend's wife, I don't know as well, she's like cleaning up because she's sober, most sober of us. She's cleaning it up, and I'm just like, oh my god, I feel awful, right? I feel so bad. I just gotta make this better later on, like not and then so we get back to the apartment, and obviously I like there's a mess, like I'd thrown up on my pant leg and stuff. And so I'm like immediately, whenever I throw up, I tend to become extremely lucid, like super on point. So then I just like take off my clothes, batch everything, set up the washer, go in the shower, like do all this stuff, right? And like kind of do all these things. And so here's the funny part. When I go to sleep and I wake up the next morning, I forget all of that. I forget that I had done all those things. And it wasn't that I blacked out, I just had like a hazy memory. And I remember waking up before everyone else and going out and just being like, oh shit, what happened last night? and I look at all my clothes and it's like all neatly cleaned and prepared, and I look at my shoes, they've been washed and they're like out on the balcony to dry, and I was like, Momiko must have cleaned up after me. Like she must have. Oh, that poor. Like I must have burned her. She must have gone through. And I had this whole story of her like cleaning up after me, and me just being like this burden, right? And then I was like, well, I mean, I felt bad for one, but I was more feeling like super grateful for her. Like I was like, man, what a great person Mamiko is. Like, you know, she's a real like G, you know, for like cleaning up someone else's throw up. And then it's funny because then I'm like sitting in there and I'm like waiting for them to wake up. And I was like, man, as soon as she wakes up, I'm gonna apologize. I'm gonna thank her. I'm gonna do all this stuff. And then as soon as I tell her the story, she's like, oh, dude, you did all that stuff. What are you talking about? He's like, dude, you did all that. I didn't do anything. She's like, I came home and you just like cleaned up all that stuff for yourself.
Oh, that's pretty dope.
Yeah. And in that moment, I was like my reality kind of just went like this because all of this like build up that I had like wanted to thrust onto Mamiko, it was like, wait, I'm actually supposed to give that to past Steven for taking care of future Steven. But because I didn't remember it, I didn't know that I helped myself, right? Like I thought someone else helped me, but
Is
in
it? Yeah.
reality, I helped myself. Like, you know, I had to be like, "What? You didn't do it?" Like, I have to thank myself. I don't. You don't thank yourself for things. You thank other people.
It's cool that you update your story yourself a little bit there.
Yeah. But it's funny how these perceptions can get run away from us. Right? I guess that's my point, right? Like, and how, yeah, we don't realize that we are um, yeah, I don't know. There's all these versions of ourselves, right? Like infinite versions of ourselves, just constantly in each moment, like
Isn't that it?
dying, reborn.
Isn't that interesting when realities like clash? Like you've gone through enough experiences through your own reality that is just the exact opposite of someone else's, and you're like, oh, what the fuck? This person's crazy, and then they think the exact same of you, and it's probably a valid. I mean, it's probably valid from their perspective that I mean, you're probably fucking crazy too, but it's like, I mean, realities are relative, and when you get down to the extreme ends of that relativity, shit can get kind of interesting.
Yeah, I it reminds me of this on the topic of relative realities. I saw this funny stand up bit on Instagram that was like, this guy's like, I finally understand why hot white girls like astrology so much. And it's because life for them goes their way so much that when something actually goes wrong, they blame like the planets. Like for the reason. Like their reality, and I know that's kind of mean, but it's a funny. I thought it was a funny joke because like I think about like pessimists and optimists, right? Like I'm an optimist, right? And like maybe people would be like, oh, well, because you've had things go well for you and you lived a privileged life, and maybe someone who's a pessimist is because they had life didn't go so well for them, and they're they got rewarded for their pessimism, right? And cynicism, like when they applied that mindset, it actually like improved their life, so they kept doing it. So yeah, these realities clashing are interesting. That's
I'm reading this quote again because I know we're talking a lot of the stuff we're talking about is correlated, but we haven't talked directly about the quote very
yeah,
much. But a lot of the stuff we talked about is very correlated to it. Um, let's see here. You have a mental image not only of who the other person is, but also of who you are, especially in relation to the person you're interacting with. Okay, that's like a pretty big first sentence in itself. So my idea of hack is interacting with, so I think what you think of me, and that affects how I act.
yes. It's like poker, right? Like you are whatever you think that I think of you is what's governing your behavior right now.
Like, how do you turn that off?
meditation.
So you are not relating with that person at all, but who you think you are is relating to who you think the other person is, and vice versa. The conceptual image your mind has made of yourself is relating to its own creation, which is the conceptual image it has made of the other person. So my mind is creating an idea of Hack and is interacting with my mind's creation of its idea of Steven. And you're doing the same shit.
Mm-hmm. But what's interesting here, and this is where it's easy to get yourself lost in it. He specifically says that there's 4 conceptual mind-made entities. Like it gets one level, the meta goes up one more, right?
So I've created myself, I've created you, you've created yourself, you created me. That's 4. Is that it?
Yeah, yeah, right. The 4.
So okay, so what is the what does it look like when there's a true relationship? Like I mean it says like for instance the Dalai Lama, like he probably doesn't have like like he's probably not doing this, right? Like what does that look
Yeah.
like? What does it feel like? Have we done that on accident before?
So, yeah, I think we've probably done it on accident. Just, I think, I think the best way to describe it, yeah, is that there's glimpses of it, right? There's moments of it. It's transitory through, you know, experience like certain experiences that go back to flow state, right? We use flow as a proxy for like a full awareness, like a so I think we've had glimpses of it. Now, I will offer up that Ramdas says that there's fully realized beings like gurus, and I think that he puts like Jesus and the Buddha and all that stuff in that realm. I don't know if he would put like the Dalai Lama in there, but he describes the characteristic of these people as like being completely and fully spacious and empty. Like as like you try to you look in their eyes and you're trying to like poke at something solid, and there's nothing there. Like there's no ego. There's no actual like person. And like I don't know if the way that I'm struggling with is that if you are in fact that kind of person, I would imagine that by definition everyone that you meet with will not be awakened to that degree, right? And will be calcified. So I imagine like a metaphor where, imagine that all of us are like salt crystals, right? Or sugar crystals, whatever. And like people who operate in full awareness are like water, right? Like I think the nature of those relationships are that they're dissolving whatever is ego structures are there, right? Just
Like
by
if
just by
somebody
being
if
there.
like if somebody's like present, then it helps people around them feel present. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's passive, right? Like water just sits there and slowly dissolves like salt, right? It doesn't you don't have to do anything. You just like put it on it and it becomes that thing. And you know, so that's the way I kind of see it. And I think that we all have the ability to drop into our water state, or maybe let's use ice. We could use ice and water because they're the same thing, right? I think we have the ability to flow between ice and water and either melt or I don't know. My analogy is breaking down, but there are elements, things that we can do to help reinforce other people's structure and ego too, right? Make them more ice-like. But if you're a calm person, I think you are like bringing people into solution. Ooh, you like that pun? Into solution.
Into solution. Chemistry pun.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, this is a cool quote. Thinking about all the people in my life that I've automated, because I think the people that you've automated, there's a much stronger like component of conceptual image that you have for them. Like let's say your mom, for instance. Sure, you have a very strong conceptual image of your mom, and she does of you, which makes things interesting.
Yeah.
So hard to not be the person that you thought that you're obligated to be. You know what I mean? Because you obviously don't feel comfortable doing that either.
Yeah.
It's like stay in your lane, buddy. Is Steven supposed to be doing that?
That's why I actually in the D&D alignment chart really like chaotic good. And I think that I don't know where I fall. Um, but I think chaotic good is an interesting one because good as a construct is one that people excuse, right? Like cuz that's the main one you want to be. Like if you want to be on any one of the automated channels, you want to be on the one that's good. But the chaos part of it allows you to keep playing and not getting so trapped by ego, right? Like I love the fact that, I show up to conservative work environments with a tattoo, right? Like I love that like I'm in this fighting space where I'm dealing with a bunch of people who are very hyper aggro, like masculine and talk about like love. You know what I mean? Like I love being that question mark. And I think the easiest way is just be super playful with your roles, Like if you do play in roles, like your video game character, like you're gonna be a mage, a warrior, a healer, a rogue, whatever. But I don't know, just be make a funky talent tree, like and wear funky clothes. Just and that breaks people like oh man, we're talking about we're doing a Burning Man planning, right? Like
Oh shit, we should register for the sale later. Don't
oh
forget.
yeah, yeah, we do need to. I think that like that's one of those things that also breaks people out of their roles, right? So I don't know. We need more of that in society. I think, right? Like it can't be. It's like a vaccine, right? Not to use such a politically charged word. It's not like we want to subvert the whole thing so that life is just Burning Man, right? And there are no roles and you don't know it, right? But we want to like have periodic inoculations, right? And then it's like, okay, go back off into the world.
It's yeah, yeah. I think I like that analogy. I mean, it's not that you want to like get rid of them. It's that you want to be made aware of them because you still need it. But like to be aware that hey, this is the label that I to be aware of the mechanism of like labeling or roles or whatever you want to call it. Um, I mean that's like a huge step in terms of I don't know. I think it helps a person like grow a lot to know how that function works. Imagine going through life without even understanding it and just being like, oh, this is obviously reality. Everyone else is, off their shit. You're just probably gonna have a bad time, maybe.
Yeah, 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 and it's really sad because um, the most important place I think where we need to work with that is people's over identification with their jobs. You know, um, like that's a big one, and I think in the 50s and 60s there was a big epidemic of like stay-at-home mothers, right? Who are like, did you watch Queen's Gambit?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the like prototypical story, like you know getting Xanax with your smoothie, right? Just because these moms they loss of identity and not having anything else to lean on. So I think yeah, that's where we have capitalism to. I mean, I'm a capitalist. I think I would say put myself out there, but I do think that that's where it's gone really bad, where people are identified with how productive they are, even like how productive their relaxation is. Like, is your vacation like you know restful enough? Are you meditating well enough? Like, you know. But I digress.
Meditating well enough. That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting when you think about the veil of what the veil of capitalism. Obviously, it's a very macro idea in the country we're in, right? But how that boils down into the individual constructs of what it makes you do, and you're tying that almost to somebody's self-worth being tied to their occupation and how productive they are within that. And it's kind of like that's what the veil of capitalism does. I wonder if that veil wasn't there, what the like are people like that in like I don't know countries that aren't capitalistic?
Um, tied to their worth. So,
Because
I
we have a
think,
capitalistic
yeah.
society, right? And somewhere somehow it trickled like this blanket has trickled down into productivity, right? Is a is a good thing. And if you're not productive, that's a bad thing. But like in another society where you're not capitalistic, is it the same? Do you get what I'm asking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Okay. Sorry, I didn't
yeah.
mean to cut you off.
No, no, you good. Yeah, never be sorry for that. I think. Well, it's funny because I think that we were just talking about this with Eckhart Tolle, right? The difference between the structure and the content, right? I think the structure of it is exactly the same, right? Like humans identify with their ability to produce something, right? Now that production might not be something like a commodity or a good. It might be producing a community, right? Or producing like art or whatever it is, producing something more intangible. Um, but I do think that the structure of human value, like humans, like valuing that like things come out of something, like that tree creates apples, right? Creation is big. But the content of it within that structure, I think, is what shifts depending. I guess that would be my guess. And these are all guesses, so yeah. I think it's also interesting, by the way, and I'm also speaking out of my lane here, but um, I think what's really intriguing to me is that individualism is a relatively new concept, right? Like we used to have like lords and serf, like the feudal system and like all that kind of stuff. And some people would argue that like capitalism is just kind of a return to the feudal system anyway. But the narrative has never been that like you as an individual can achieve your dreams, right? Like you can marry like the production, like the function of creating things to survive and thrive with like something as like a fantasy, and I think the chemical reaction of those two things has been really interesting. And I think it's also been interesting in terms of like modern marriage and romance too, because almost a similar thing has happened where you took something that was very economical, right? Marriage was mostly an economic arrangement, right? And then you said this person's your soulmate and you're gonna like love them, and then so then now almost like that concept has been overburdened. In both cases they've been overburdened, and they I would argue that, I mean, they're that yeah, it's kind of gotten too far. And it's like people are what are they most people are most sad about two things right now, right? Like they don't have a great career or job or thing that they're passionate about, or they don't have like their ride or die like significant other that they can cuddle with and watch Netflix and then go on adventures. Like these two things are, I'd say, like the biggest things take away from people's self-worth.
Yeah, marriage is a pretty interesting construct. Whoever thought of that one?
Yeah, that is a funny one. That's a super interesting one because I don't know what the alternative counterfactuals like. Every time we talk about stuff like this, I just like monogamy and marriage just seems so normal. It's hard to even stretch your mind to think about you know.
I mean, it was probably much worse before marriage.
Yeah, that's the argument, right? But people are pushing all that stuff now. Yeah, because you had you would protect your progeny and make sure that they inherited all the stuff that you created in your lifetime, so they didn't have to start over, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, didn't you see the fucking the hippo video I sent you? Shit
yeah,
was crazy, dude. Hippos don't get married.
yeah. Hippos don't get married. Yeah, infanticide, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, dude.
Damn, marriage is a construct. Sign on the dotted line.
We should talk about marriage. I think marriage is an interesting one to
We
deconstruct.
allowed to talk about marriage because neither of us are married.
Uh,
I mean, we can share what we think, of course. I'm sure we're allowed to talk about it, but I was gonna be like,
yeah.
yo, these like, I mean, I'm in my upper 30s and I'm not married, so I mean, is my opinion even valid here? I'm sure it's valid, but to whom?
Yeah, our platform is not big enough to have that type of social responsibility, right?
Okay, you're
Like,
right.
it's basically like, why would you fault, like, if you could never, you should never fault, I think, people for trying to understand a domain that they're not, it's not like a lived experience for them, right? The only time you'd ever want to fault them is that if they had a huge platform and they had a media responsibility, I think. But we don't have that. We're just earnestly trying to figure it out, right?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, we
Yeah.
talk about marriage one of these times. That should be an interesting one.
Yeah, I think that'd be an interesting one too. It'd be fun. It might be cool to see have some quotes on it too. Like I like when I was marrying my friend, and I was trying to figure out what to say during the ceremony, like about love and marriage. Like there's words we say around about marriage, right? But we can save that one.
Yeah.
First slide's fine. Second slide is good. But you got another picture. Have another picture.
I kind of like this quote thing. Maybe we should keep doing it or bring it back every once in a while.
I think so too. I think what I liked about it, the highlight of this pod for me was when you like went back to it to look at it again to make sure like one we were still talking about it and two there's like different parts to the quote, you know? Like it's not just like the quote. There's like the back end of it or the middle of it. So,
Yeah.
I thought it was cool.
Yeah, honestly, I think we could have made either one of these quotes like almost the whole pod if we wanted to actually try to stretch it out. Um, I mean, because they're both if you agree to the quote, then it fundamentally shifts like a very common perspective that most people have. So from any point of that perspective shift, we can talk about anything that pops off from that, which is like almost like everything. It's like the first quote we started talking about like words and labels representing like things and having that be automated away. But then the question is like, okay, what the fuck do we automate away? Then I'm talking about trees, and then you're talking about like automating people, and then we're like, wait, we automate ourselves, and then it just becomes like its own like little like lane. So I think as long as we pick good quotes, then there'll be a lot of jumping off points.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. And at this point, there's no running away from it. Like I think when you said that if you accept this premise, then everything else is open game. Like that premise is basically the main identity of this pod.
Yeah.
Like the words are yeah. Like that's it.
I'm trying to think what it would have like if I listened to this pod 20 years ago. I wonder what I would have thought because that idea isn't an easy idea to wrap your head around. It it's very it sounds simple now, but it definitely didn't sound simple when I first heard about it. I was like, it's probably like sounded like super like very I don't know too spiritual maybe. Not easy to understand perhaps. I'm not sure what the right what the right thing is there.
Yeah, I, I think that's something that we'll continue to refine. Um, because you're right, I 100% take for granted how long it took to even get to this point of realization, and it was like a combination of reading, um, and also direct experience, right? So I wonder how we can bring it back. It's always the fundamental question. Like when you go deep into something, like how do you become so good at it that you can explain it to people who are new, right? All the time. I will
Yeah,
say,
that should be an intention of this podcast.
yeah,
Become so good at it that we can explain it to people that are new all the time. I don't know if that's gonna look like a podcast. Maybe we got to start writing some, or maybe we have to start an IG or something. But um, I don't know. Obviously, like the people we follow, like Eckhart Tolle, are super good at doing that, which is why I understand on some level now. Alan Watts, obviously, as well. But is there even a way to like introduce that on a more basic level?
I think so. I think I think we have to have some, like, I think knowing our personality types, it's always going to be more riffing, right? More like jazz improv. But, and I know that Alan Watts was always riffing. Like all these big guys are always riffing. But there are, like, they did do like, like deep study, and they do have, like, Alan Watts has some lectures where he's in front of a whiteboard and he's talking about, like, you know, theology in a very, like, classroom kind of sense. So, I think we should maybe, yeah, carve some time out for that in the future. But I think that the 80 of it is still getting good at riffing, like getting good at being put on the spot. Like that's where I want to be good at, because I know I'm not that other type of person, right?
Well, the thing is, a lot of times the way that you riff is because you've spent time studying. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because you've like loaded your head with like the right material, that the riffing part is you finding a way to put that material together in a way that makes sense to you. You know what I mean? Like me talking now, just like it sounds like I'm talking out of my ass, but a lot of it probably came from, I don't know, reading Eckhart Tolle books or listening to Alan Watts lectures and stuff. Um,
you know what? I would no, I wouldn't even stop there. I'd say it's probably because of the writing that you've done on your own, right, in your own journals and stuff like that. And so I 100% agree. Like I definitely agree. Um,
yeah, my journaling is definitely riffing as well. It's like me riffing with myself. Um, but the thoughts that get loaded into my head, like where does that come from? I mean, definitely experiences, of course. And I think I like what you said. You need to have the knowledge, but then you need to have the experience with the knowledge, like direct experience. And then it's kind of like this loop that keeps feeding into itself. It's like knowledge, then experience, knowledge, experience, and if it's just knowledge, it doesn't go anywhere. And if it's just experience without knowledge, then it becomes a lot harder to put the words behind it. But it's like a loop that I don't know. Like I've read like each Eckhart Tolle book, both of his books, Power of Now and A New Earth, 3 times each in the last 10 years, and every single time it just sounds different. And I know that sounds weird because it's the same damn book, but I don't know why or how. Probably because of the experience thing, you know.
yeah, 100%. So shall we conclude this, and then maybe we can do a debrief?
Yeah, let's conclude this. I'm good. I'm good if you're good.
Sounds good.
We'll
Real
have to
quick
think of
before
a
we close, how does the
sure.
2 p.m. hit?
I like the 2 p.m. It's actually much better for me because I actually get work done before this, so I don't feel like a total like waste of a day.
Nice.
But what about you? What do you think?
No, I like it too. But yeah,
I feel like I can always converse, like um, like even if you hit me up like at 9 p.m. and we just like I can probably talk. Um, but like if I put the pod like in the morning and I have to get up for it, and let's say last night somehow I didn't sleep on time, then I'll get up for the pod because I'm never not going to do that. but then the rest of my day I'm just gonna be like pretty groggy. So yeah, so that's the only issue with the morning thing is because I'm a terrible person.
I'm in that same spot right now. I'm no better at the moment. So cool. All right. Well, episode 36. 36 weeks. That's crazy. We're almost there.
All
See
right,
how it
sweet.
goes. Over now.